The stargates are pathways for frequencies that are required in this new phase of Gaia's ascension, her evolution as a planet, because they have been closed on purpose so we could experience the lower vibrational frequencies, and they will be opened intentionally as we step into this new period of Gaia. And the Star Mothers, they want us to know that they hold the keys to open the stargates along with others. They can also show us that we have brought keys to open stargates because they truly believe and want to honor our sovereignty as their children, and our ability to become empowered to co-create this ascension process and be self-sufficient in it.
JJ Brighton, welcome on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
Ooh, this one has multiple layers. First of all, I'm excited to tell you what I'm excited about because I know you asked this question. Two things popped in for me. One's kind of more serious. The other one's a little more silly. The first one is I'm just very excited to be in this present moment with all of my heart, my mind, and my soul to share what's most in alignment for you personally and for this beautiful audience, this beautiful soul family that you've gathered for your podcast. So that's the more serious thing that I'm excited about. The other thing I'm really excited about is that I was going through all of your podcasts and I had open on YouTube all of the, like, probably 20. I could see them in that big long list, like the last 20 that you've done. And I was like, I am so excited to find out what the title of my podcast is going to be. It's like, Soccer Mom Births Alien Child and Raises Him. I was like, what is Emilio going to come up with for my title? So that's what I'm excited about. I can't wait to see what we choose for the title.
We will definitely have to get creative for that title. Sometimes it'll come through like a quick download and I write it down really quick. And other times, as the YouTube algorithms love to play around, and you have to sort of play in the game in and out.
Yes, you do.
One thing that I wanted to begin with you, JJ, is right now as you've said, we're in the portal between portals. Mm-hmm. So we're just coming off the 7-7 portal, heading into the 8-8 portal. And you said this is a very potent time because we're going through a profound convergence across multiple dimensions and timelines. So where really are we right now in this huge portal that's opening up? And how can people begin to start tapping into these energies to integrate their highest timeline in their life?
Ooh, I love that because interestingly enough, as I was looking at your YouTube channel, this was the theme that I felt coming through for you personally. Even everything is as above, so below, the microcosm to the macrocosm and reverse of that. So what's happening for us individually is happening at a collective level. So I was even picking up on this theme when I was looking at your YouTube channel. I got this really strong feeling that this time period for you is a convergence of all of the podcasts you've ever done. I didn't really fully understand it. So I'm going to use you as an example, if that's okay. I'm just going to kind of talk through like what that could mean for you, but also how that applies to everybody collectively. But I felt like this alchemy happening, and that almost so many timelines for you personally have been jumped as you've traversed the different guests, I guess you could say. Like it was almost like I could see stair steps for you and this progression for you. And I'm sure you felt that because I was even reflecting on some of your episodes from like a year ago, and I could energetically feel the difference from then to now, like in you, and even in just, like I said, like just the thumbnail, just the energy of it. And so what came into my mind was the idea of like a paper doll being extended out, right? Like this linear, and now everything is converging, right? So you're folding that paper doll back in. You're folding in all the energy of all of that transition. And we're really being invited to take ourselves out of a linear like frame of reference and linear perspective. And that's really what convergence does. Convergence melds everything and merges everything into one. And what is that one? That's unity consciousness. That's the frequency of unity consciousness. So what we're talking about really is a convergence into the frequency of unity consciousness. And that's where we're landing. And this is another thing I'm excited about. This is a really thrilling time for humanity to finally be transitioning out of duality and into unity consciousness, opening our eyes to multidimensionality, to the fact that we have parallel lives. All the movies, you notice, Doctor Strange, all the Marvel movies, it's being dropped in from every direction what's going on. I know there's other shows right now on Netflix. I do not watch a ton of Netflix, but people keep telling me to watch these shows about time and timelines and convergence and becoming aware that there are versions of you that exist parallel to this one. But those are all the things that are coming up for me. I would love to know if you've felt into that for yourself personally. Have you felt that?
Well, for people that didn't know this, this isn't our first time meeting. Last month I was in Los Angeles for just shooting a few podcast episodes over there in person. And we met up in your sanctuary down in California, and you offered this beautiful session that combined light language, a little bit of past life regression. And I've gotten so many confirmations of there's a vision that you channeled for me of when I was a man in another life overlooking a lake in the Andes Mountains. And I would bring my flute with me every year as a pilgrimage. And I've had 2 people since then confirm that same vision that you saw. And tomorrow is my 26th birthday. And you know what I'm going to get for my birthday? A flute. So
Yes.
I feel that there is this emergence of an awakening within my own self, a remembrance. And it's just beginning for me. But I would also love to go back into your timeline of when that began to activate for you. I know you were on an airplane in 2020 and you started seeing particles in the air. Was that the moment that your channel started to open up, or was it something that started unfolding beforehand?
Oh, wow. Definitely unfolding beforehand, but that was a key moment. That was a key moment for me. There's no doubt about it. I honestly feel like most of us are born with we'll call them psychic abilities, with our clairs. But due to programming, education, culture, just the nature of this human existence and where we were, especially when I was born, which was quite a bit before you were born, we kind of didn't really get guided towards that as far as developing those gifts. I felt like I was always spiritual. I was raised in organized religion. And so there was talk of angels, and people, when they died, they weren't fully, they weren't gone. Their soul still lived on. And what happened was, when I was 12 years old, my father passed away. And for anybody who's experienced the passing of a loved one, the transitioning of a loved one, I've spoken to many, many, many clients who had their awakening happen when a loved one passed, because they were able to feel and sense them. And they really opened up to the fact that there was something other than just this existence. So for me, it began when I wanted to communicate with him and tune into him, and he wasn't there physically. And so every once in a while, I would just be able to feel his presence. There were dreams that would happen. And so that was kind of like mediumship, right? After that, I continued to sort of feel into the idea of mediumship and connecting with people who were in non-physical to me. And I would say that was my awakening to communication and connection. But again, I even don't love using the word awakening. I love using the word remembering, we're always connected. It's just the veils of forgetting that we've consented to have in this life that cause us to temporarily forget, and that we have free will. And when we honor that, well, how about this? When we become more aware of our own free will with regards to our clairs, our psychic senses, and our abilities to tune into that which is not physical, we step into this world that we're in now, that you're in with me, that everybody who you've ever had on your podcast is in. And it's not because we're a special chosen few. You know that. It's not because we're a special chosen few. It's because this is what we've come to do. This is our like divine gifts and abilities as beings that are part of Source. And it's just a matter of reminding people and helping them remember that this is what they can do. And again, it's like we're transitioning out of any spiritual programming or spiritual hierarchy, that there are a specific certain people that can do this. And we are recognizing and honoring that we are mirrors of each other. We all have these abilities.
That's beautiful that you shared how a connection so strong like that of with your father was strong enough to be able to propel you into this awakening of communing with the other side. And you were mentioning how our soul sort of fragments into these multiple parallel realities. I wanted to ask you why is that the soul fragments in the first place? Because I know you speak a lot about the integration of the soul. Yeah. So how do we understand that fragmentation and bringing it back to the integration?
Oh, well, first of all, I would love to just remind everybody listening that everything I say, run by your own intuition and your own discernment, because I want to honor everyone's sovereignty and their framework that they would like to, create their reality with. So please take this with that idea in mind, because I don't claim to be an expert either. I'm learning just right alongside everybody else who's opening to this knowledge. This is really ancient knowledge that has existed since the beginning of the beginning, as far as even initiations that were essentially this idea of reintegrating these soul aspects. But you had Robert Edward Grant on a little bit ago, and I know you've had him on a couple of times, and he talked about Source expanding to experience itself. So I'm going to go back to exactly what I said at the beginning, which is everything is, a microcosm of the macrocosm, or the macrocosm of the microcosm. So the Hermetic principles, as above, so below. Just like Source experimented with this by splitting itself off into a perceived duality, we, as a little tiny baby version of that, decided to do the same thing. And so there is an oversoul or monad. And I think a lot of times we detach ourselves from that monad. This is part of our linear thinking, right? Our duality, that monad is outside of me. When in reality, if we call in our multidimensional perspective and vision, we're able to understand we are that monad. That monad is us. So then this idea of bringing back these aspects that have expanded and learned and grown and developed gifts, bringing them back and calling them into, say, for instance, this incarnation, this life, so that we can serve humanity, so that we can both evolve individually and collectively. That's the whole gist of the integration piece. And of course, this is my multidimensional soul integration. I call it mine. It's not really mine. It's a modality that I labeled as multidimensional soul integration, which is something that I was inspired by Dolores Cannon's work to lean into, because I felt like that was phase one. I was given a vision, like she was preparing for something else. And I feel like a lot of people, not just me, are now understanding the reason why we are opening to parallel lives and to past lives is so that we can take ourselves either on our own or with assistance through these phases of initiation. I would call them activation, to reintegrate aspects back into this particular incarnation at even a cellular level. And the interesting thing about it is, as I've tuned in, and there's not a lot of information about this, honestly. Like, you can't just Google. So you literally have to just go straight to your guides, your higher self. I've connected with my Egyptian past lives. I've connected with Egyptian guides like Thoth, and I have received information through my channel around the fact that this is something that has been practiced through multiple cultures in multiple ways. Some that come to mind are like Lemuria. I definitely know there was something similar during the time of Lemuria. Obviously, Atlantis, you think of Egypt. There's a lot of shamanic practices that kind of do this in some way, different flavor of this. But this idea of integrating soul aspects that have fragmented off, experienced their realities, and are ready to be reintegrated into this particular incarnation is a really, I would say it's one of the most powerful tools we have on this part of our journey of ascension, both individually and collectively.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dolores Cannon, and I think these are powerful souls that came in to really leave a groundwork for what is coming in the new earth. Another teacher that I know you've been influenced by as well, and it's one of my favorite books of all time is Barbara Marciniak's Bringers of the Dawn. And you were talking about another one of her books called The Earth Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library, where she talks about the Mayan timekeepers. So when we're talking about past civilizations, what about these, ancients like the Mayans or the Lemurians, the Atlanteans, what did they understand about time, utilizing stargates, and what technologies that they held in that time period to be able to hold such a high state of consciousness?
Ooh. That feels like something I'd almost have to channel for you right now. That
We're
wants
open.
to come through. You're like,
we're open for that.
I'm like, oh, okay. I'd love to, if that's okay. I'd love to not answer just from like this here and now me, but also tune into whatever like to come in. So in the book, I learned through what she had mentioned, through the Pleiadians, that the Mayan timekeepers were not from Earth, right? So they were galactic star beings from another dimension. I don't even know that we can place them in a location in the galaxy or in the universe because they feel, to me, like they transcend time and space. So they're essentially some of the ideas that want to come through today to place in this space, in this container, because I feel like you have a lot of listeners and viewers who are very intuitive and very sovereign. And so I always like to say, let me give you a buffet, and then I know that you can take these little nuggets of information and create the plate that you want from all of this. But I'd love to just place in your awareness words and themes that are coming through right now from my guides and higher self, and also the timekeepers, to help you activate remembrance. Because even in this, Emilio, as we're talking right now, you know that a lot of people who listen to this are not learning something new. They're remembering something very, very old that they already knew. So my goal in bringing forward this information, but honoring the fact that you brought up this topic, because it's extremely important right now in this portal between portals, is what I'm hearing. It's extremely important that you're bringing this up. I am not only saying to you with my words what I'm going to say to you, and maybe some light language, but I'm also holding a frequency right now and transmitting that, so that if there's anything that I can't bring through language and voice, that those who are listening have the opportunity to receive. It could come through symbols. It could come through other ways. So I just want to invite everybody who's receiving this to open to that level, to where we are starting to really activate our abilities to communicate telepathically. And we don't need as many words as we used to need. I've actually had moments in my podcast, which has really evolved over the last 6 months, where I was just quiet. I just knew, and I could feel everybody on the other side, because I'm psychic, right? Like beyond time and space. When I'm recording, I can actually feel the people there listening. that we were having some kind of telepathic, like there was transmission going on, even in just pure silence. So that being said, thank you for allowing me the time and space to be able to do this.
Of course.
So just allowing everyone also to just take a deep breath. This does feel a little weighty in a way. So I want you to know that this information can come through very easy with grace and flow if you allow it to. And part of that requires a little bit of surrendering on your part. So just surrendering a little bit more. If you're noticing there might be a little tension in your body, I'm being told by our guides right now, there is some programming in our physicality that is resistant to anything other than linear time and space. And that's why coming up against this concept of the Mayan timekeepers can feel literally in your body like, whoa, like a little overwhelm. So again, just noticing any place in your body where you might be holding a little tension and just exhaling that out. Thank you. I do feel drawn to bring through some light codes. If you are new to light language, which I know, Emilio, you've had people on who do light language, but if you are new to it, just remember these are to be understood beyond the conscious mind. That's why the interpretation doesn't always come through in English. This is a light language transmission to calibrate you to receive the Mayan timekeeper frequency. Gi ak ok uyana I I ok ok iana a I ok oki aka iya. I have 3 Mayan timekeepers coming forward. Interestingly enough, they are holding the frequency of the prince template, like prince as in not king, but prince. For me, that is a specific archetype. And I feel like they hold a frequency of youth, but wisdom. And in age, if we were to say, oh, they feel like a 16-year-old, they feel like that. And they're all male, masculine, I'll say masculine, right? Each of them is wearing a headdress of some kind that signifies something. And if we were to look at Mayan art, we could probably identify and match them to certain pieces of Mayan art, because I feel like, again, this is a symbol for who they are and what they carry. So there are 3 of them, and each of them represents something different. One represents time, one represents space, and one represents the void. And they are coming to teach us a mastery of time, mastery of space, and mastery of the void. This is our call as humanity to step into a new level of mastery of these 3 things. They are here on the planet and have been since it's 2020. They've been here since 2020, if you were to look at it in linear time, in a more amplified way than in previous times. I always laugh when I talk about time in front of them because I know it's not real. So I'm always like, even when I say the word time, they just go he, because they're like, oh, there's really no such thing as time. And I'm like, I know there's no such thing as time. I feel the most effective way for us to communicate with them, this is just what they're telling me. I've never received this information before. This is new. Through the brain stem and the spinal cord is where the keys and codes to understand and unlock the mysteries of time, space, and the void are held in our physical vessels. So just inviting everybody to take a nice deep breath again. And if you are open to receive through that brainstem and the spinal cord, a transmission from these guides who are vibrating at very high frequency, and they are, just as a disclaimer, in service to humanity, in alignment with source love and with our best interest at heart, honoring our sovereignty, seeing themselves as equals, not superiors. If you are willing and ready to receive, they will be able to transmit that for a moment. And we just transcend time and space so that you can receive whatever you needed to receive from this without the bounds of time. And then we bring it to completion at 3, 2, 1. And so it is. We're complete.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I felt that up into my right hemisphere of my brain. I just felt like tingling sensations as you were speaking, especially when the light language came in. Speaking on that of light language, you've mentioned how every language that is existent on Earth carries programming. Yeah. So I'm really curious to understand how that process of language creation, because I know you're a linguist, a starseed linguist. How does the creation of language in a way limit us? And how can language also free us at the same time?
Yes. Me encantaría hablar sobre esto. So, a little history. I have a background in linguistics and I taught foreign languages, so I'm fluent in Spanish. So that was a fun connection that we made, Emilio, when we met. But having studied and actually got my master's degree in Spanish, you do explore languages in general and linguistics in general. So it's just hilarious that I'm now in this world of light language, which is different dialects, different sounds coming through. But this idea of languages holding programming and how it can limit us, the first thing that wants to come through in response to that, as I've set the intention to channel my higher self, or the highest information I can bring through, or the most expansive information that I can bring through. And so I want to make sure to stop for just a moment, because the word limit, they're like, let's do an object lesson. Let's talk about the word limit. The word limit can imply some lack of sovereignty. And so what they're reminding us is that any limits, any parts of society that are quote unquote limiting us, for another part of us, they're just giving us different experiences of reality. And so in the end, any sort of quote unquote limitations, first of all, we put those in place ourselves. We consented to be limited. And that is exactly what these different existences in different frequencies are. So it's really not a limitation, it's just a different flavor. So where we might have had a lifetime on a star, or even on Earth, maybe in Lemuria, where language did not structure our reality as into lower frequencies and different experiences like we are in now. Although we have experienced that, we chose to then come into this lifetime where we did get sort of locked into speaking our native tongue, not taught from the time we were a baby to just transmit the frequencies of our soul, which is what was more common in Lemuria. So if you can see it from a perspective of the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, and the fact that everybody spoke one language, that wasn't actually one language that had the same like nouns and verbs and parts of it. It was just everybody speaking and understanding at the soul level and transmitting frequencies. And the sound didn't matter really. This like as in the fact that everybody's word for apple would have been different, or everybody's word, or could have been the same. It just depends. But the idea that when the quote unquote Tower of Babel fell and the languages were, everybody was given their languages. And I'm sure there are lots of people who have lots more to say about this. I know Billy Carson probably has a lot to say about this event because he's so much into history. But I'm just going off of just kind of what I want to reveal to you, like right now, that's most important, is that we agreed to then settle into a reality where these collective tongues were spoken, and that we agreed to then play in using this language to sometimes exercise power or form as a collective group a structure and infuse subconscious programming through words, and not just words, but sounds. Sounds are so important. One other interesting quick thing. I've always felt so Spanish, knowing Spanish and understanding and now being like intuitive, right? Because when I was in college, I was not doing all this stuff. But
Not
now
yet.
I'm not yet. It was like a baby. I think people who are bilingual can understand this. Sometimes you can't say it in English. You want to say it in the other language, or like I want to say it in Spanish because I'm like, I cannot, that word can't be in English. Like it can't be contained, the meaning of that word. But for me, and a lot of people will confirm this, but you can research this more. Again, sometimes I'm not the most well-studied because I've been raising my children. So I'm just like, I took a little gap between like my college and then where I'm at now. And I really dove into, parenting and being a mom. But I will say the vowel sounds, the pure vowel sounds. Now we know that for instance, certain words couldn't be said in ancient Hebrew because they were so powerful. And we know that reality in the beginning was the word. The words were created. And the vowel sounds hold those pure frequencies of source. Now, when it comes to Spanish, one of my favorite things about it, and I would tell people who were learning Spanish, I would say, do you know that Spanish is much easier, in my opinion, it's much easier to learn than English pronunciation, because there's only one sound per vowel. What English did is it has taken the pure sounds of creation. So Sanskrit also has these sounds, okay, and has splintered them into fuzzy vowels. So there are many more fuzzy vowels. So if I am speaking light language, I find that I tend to lean a lot on these vowel sounds. So you heard when the Mayan Timekeepers came in, there's more pure vowel sounds coming in. There are other kinds of quote unquote light language that don't come through just like I'm describing, but I'm just giving an example. So that's what wants to come through in response to that question about languages and what they hold as far as frequencies.
You mentioned that you are a mom, a soccer mom, as you said in the beginning, but someone probably seeing you for the first time would think that you're younger than me and would have no idea or could have never guessed that you have 8 children under your wing. When we met for the first time, you mentioned that you wanted to have 5. And then something happened around the time.
2.
Or like 2.
Or like 2. But I know what you're talking about. Keep going.
Something happened around, I think it was the 2012 marker, where they told you that the children coming in after that date would be in a way different genetically, and they gave you the choice of whether or not to birth these starseed children. What was that experience like of having little channelers? I got to meet one of them. Incredible. Like, I was blown away with him when we first met. We have the same birthday as well, so a cool synchronicity.
Cool.
So what was that experience like of having that choice of, am I going to give birth to now these new children that are stepping in?
Yeah.
And did you feel prepared for that at the time?
So here's the funny thing about your question. Yes, I did. I actually, when I got married, I was not planning on having 8 children. I didn't share this with you when we first met. I was actually planning on having like 2. Like I was like maybe 2 kids, and I did plan each and every one of them. my husband and I, and that's a whole other story that I could, do a whole other podcast on, as far as like how in the world and what in the world was like we think, all of those things. I did have 5 before 2012, like you were saying. And I honestly did feel, I mean, you guys know, like, there are those moments in your life where you split into a totally different timeline. Like, those were it's two roads on the path, the poem, right? Like, which one do I take? You guys know those moments. You know those moments. This might be one of those moments for you right now. You might feel that in your body, that after listening to this, I mean, it sounds weird, but saying like listening to a podcast could change your life forever. I was just talking to a friend, and she literally listened to a podcast. She only listened to one episode of this podcast. She never listened to any other again. And this one episode of of a podcast changed her life and activated her forever. So for me, this moment, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I was spiritual. I was in organized religion. And every time I did choose to have another child, it was done with like a reassurance from my higher, like I could feel my higher self. I could feel, back then it would be like God. Like I could feel that was aligned. I could actually feel that child. Like there was still another one there. And this is like very emotional for me. I don't know. I'm just feeling a lot of emotion. There might be other people listening who've been in a similar experience. I might be picking up on your emotion of when you chose a different timeline because you chose to bring in a soul that was vibrating at a different frequency that humanity needed even more. In order to do that, my body had to go through some upgrades, and that was not easy. And then I ended up having the 3 that you said after 2012, and was told by my guides, and the Mayan Timekeepers will say the same thing. After 2012, this timeline I'm in right now with you, because otherwise we would not be here on this podcast together. I chose a timeline that was not going to end in apocalypse, if that makes sense. Like end of days, like biblical stuff.
Yeah.
Fun fact, I once connected with John the Revelator from the Bible, from the New Testament. And I said to him, I do not like your book because Revelations, because it's very depressing. There's a lot of destruction, I feel. He said, well, you have to understand that there was many more timelines that I received while I was getting those visions that I documented, but those are the ones they chose to put in because they were the most fear-based. They held the frequencies of fear, and that's what the church wanted, was people to be afraid. And so back to what I was saying, I am not in the timeline that is fear-based with the apocalyptic stuff happening, which is right now, as you know, in the United States, there's some funky stuff going on. But I mean, I just don't get into it. I just observe. And these kiddos that came through, which is interesting, 2 came at the same time. They were twins. And then the third one came, the one you met, who is my little starseed. And some people who've been at my events, my gatherings, my little starseed just helped me teach a light language workshop in Connecticut and was interpreting people's light language was full on. And these kiddos are different. I just have like a little bit of light language coming through in order for me to settle into the frequency I need to be in to finish my thoughts. So I feel the galactic children coming in. I feel you are personally very connected to galactic children because I feel that what you are doing, Emilio, at your age, and you happen to be similar in age to one of my children, you're helping to bridge us, the parents, with that frequency of those galactic children, who they are and what they're doing. And these children, some are embodied right now, some are looking to be embodied, and some will not be embodied. Some will just stay in our field as non-physical beings. They all hold a very, very high frequency without going into big time detail. They all hold an extremely high frequency that is necessary for our collective ascension. And they have a contract with Gaia and humanity to serve. One of the things I run into as a mother of these children, and I mean, not to put on equal ground at all by what I'm saying this, like Mary and Jesus. But we hear the stories of Jesus as an ascended master embodied when he was teaching at 12 years old, the wise ones. And thinking of Mary, I think of her a lot because it is an interesting role to play when you have these little galactic, very high frequency beings. These really, honestly, ascended masters, they are older than me. I don't remember if my little starseed said this in front of you, but he says this a lot. He just reminds me frequently that he is older than I am.
He told me, or he told us that he spoke 300 languages, and he was like correcting you on some stuff like, no, like that in that planet, they talk like this. And
yeah. So being a parent to these children, you have to maintain this balance between you're a human kid, you're a human kid right now, and then honoring their level of mastery as a soul, but knowing that they consented to come into a human child body and to do regular human child things is really fascinating, because I am not pushing him to do all of this quote unquote channeling and galactic. It's a fine line I walk. This is actually, for those of you who don't know, the first podcast on camera I've ever done. I've actually been on very few podcasts. This is the first one I've ever done on camera. One of the reasons is I feel very strongly about giving my kiddos a somewhat normal human life too, and not just plunging them into this where it becomes completely ungrounded, because there's still so much programming in the spiritual community that is just a reaction from so many of us starseeds who have had, it's been a little rough. It's been a little rough for us on this planet, but we oftentimes disassociate, and then all of the spiritual bypassing, right? But it's really more just a coping mechanism for starseeds. So I want to try to keep my kids grounded into the beauty of the planet and humanity, where I'm not creating a narrative of divisiveness and duality, which can be very easy to do and was always done when I was in more of an organized religion, because it's us versus them. And so I don't even want them to think because they channel or because they speak light language that they're any better than anybody else either. So it's a really fascinating world to navigate. And there's probably people listening right now who have these kiddos. Although most of them, if not all, are what sometimes people call neurodivergent. Others are not quite, just depending on what their contract was when they came in here to hold the frequencies that they came to hold. But I'm very, very passionate about not even outwardly, but just frequency wise, holding space for all the parents of these kids who came in after 2012. It's a really fascinating world we live in, and it's a ride. It's definitely a ride.
And it was beautiful to witness you as well, interacting with your son at 10 years old, right? Remembering all of these past lives, and also you helping him connect the dots with certain things. I feel like for the next generation of parents, one of the biggest qualities has to be curiosity, and like really dropping in with those children, of almost being an interviewer, an observer to their unfolding of what they're remembering. How did you begin to start allowing your children to even start opening up with you about these things in the first place?
That's a wonderful question. And I'm laughing because I'm 99% sure that my little starseed is like knocking on the door right now. They always come when I'm like, it's like, I'm right here. I'm like sending him telepathic messages. I'll be done in a second. But So that was like a little bit distracting. Okay, so just connecting to that. Repeat it for me one more time because I'm so tuning into him now. He's like, okay, so no, I think I can grasp it. So just keeping their nervous systems regulated, helping them understand how to keep your nervous system regulated. That is probably not the answer that anybody predicted I was going to give, but I will tell you right now, this wave of emotional intelligence being at the forefront of education, and honestly, it's even entered into public ed. My kids had teachers who were showing them techniques to disarm the fight or flight in the nervous system. It was like before they took a test, they were like having them, I can't remember what they were doing, breathing. They were doing breath work in school. So their nervous system has to be regulated, has to be, I don't know if regulated is the best word, but I'll use that one. And you guys know, like, I'm sure most of the people listening to this know, we talk about co-regulation. So you cannot talk the talk and not walk the walk. You must learn to regulate your own nervous system. Model that for your child. This super high frequency being in a physical body. That's like a recipe for nervous system frazzleness, right? It's like, if you can model that, like you wouldn't be their parent if you couldn't as well, or grandparent or aunt or uncle or whatever you are to them, teacher. So it always goes back to you. It always goes back to the parent, right? And regulating your nervous system to then create environments where they feel safe enough to express their authentic selves in whatever way, shape, or form that comes, whether they are talking about something super random or a past life. Honoring every word that comes out of their mouth so that they don't feel like any comment they make or anything they say isn't valid enough to have been expressed. And then clearing your own channel through whatever means you can by leveling up your mastery of like, say, self, like your diet, your health, like your own breath, your own meditation, your own levels of surrender, your own levels of self-care, doing that enough so that your channel is clear enough so that you can ask them the questions that will open the doors. I am being told right now by my guides and higher self, specifically for parents of these kiddos, you hold keys to open the doorways within them, the portals of wisdom. You have a contract. Emilio, to some degree, you are doing this on your podcast with the people you connect with. Your questions are keys that unlock pieces of information held by the person that you are speaking with, just like a parent can do the same with their children. Now, some of you might say, well, like, I'm not going to, like, what if these kids are sharing all this? Now, some parents will share all this on maybe social media. I know a couple people who do. I am very, very particular about what I share. Remember that anything they say with a witness is all that is needed for that wisdom to be anchored into the planet. So if you are having a conversation with your little starseed in your bedroom, in your home, and they're saying things and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? You may not need to do anything with it. It just might need to have been spoken out into the grid of Gaia through their frequencies of voice, and you needed to witness it. If you want to record it or write it down, that's fine too, because you're going to witness it either way. There's lots of ways to witness. That is why they are here. That is why they're here, and you hold the keys. It's a partnership. That's what wants to come through.
JJ, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for that guidance on conscious parenting.
Yeah.
The evolved
Woo!
Dr. Shafali.
I love doing this because I will tell people all the time that like when I am in a moment with someone like yourself who is gifted at holding space for wisdom to come through someone else, right? Because you're holding that space for me right now to bring through this, and your audiences too, everybody listening. I learn so much. I've never said what I said to you, and I didn't know that explicitly and consciously like I just described it to you. And I'm excited to continue to share that piece of information that just dropped in because all of us here gathered with this intention to bring that information. So thank you.
It's beautiful to see how, again, that frequency of curiosity can open codes within other people. And that's become one of my new mottos, is that, you know, we are code activators with each other. You mentioned co-regulation, but a big theme for this year as well is co-activation, as you talked about. So I think the first phase of when we're awakening or where we're getting into these topics, maybe listening to this podcast like hidden away in our closet so no one knows we're, you know, listening to these types of things. That's like the first step. And then I think there's then a longing to want to connect because we are social creatures. So talk to us about the importance of activating in communion and in community with other people, how that can really accelerate our consciousness.
This is so important right now that you're opening this right now. So, so much just energy flooding in right now. I just want to invite everybody to just take a deep breath. So I'm going to back us up just a teeny tiny bit because there are probably people listening who haven't heard me say this. And as an intuitive and having worked with, I would dare say hundreds of clients over the last 3 years since I've really leaned into what I'm doing, I notice there is quite a bit of subconscious programming holding on to the lone wolf template is what I call it, or the isolation and the cocooning phase, which is a phase, due to trauma from past lives when people that were intuitive, psychics, oracles, energy healers, alchemists gathered together and were punished, maybe, or created an oops incident, like in the lower vibrational timelines of Atlantis.
Talk to us about that.
Where we co-activated ourselves into a giant nuclear type situation because we got a little bit into it. And I try to refrain from using words of judgment because, again, that's the reality we chose to create in that timeline. There was another timeline of Atlantis that most people are not aware of because it's overshadowed by their memories of the timelines of Atlantis where that happened, the destruction. My little starseed remembers it. I have a crystal that has a crack in it. It's a quartz. And I showed it to him once and he said that crystal was part of the original giant crystal of Atlantis. And he said, if that crystal didn't have the crack in it, you wouldn't be able to hold it. He said that to me. So he has memories of this timeline of destruction. I've actually received information and I feel like it's in alignment for me to share this. I don't share everything about what comes through for my little starseed, but I will share this because it will probably resonate. There obviously are multiple timelines of Atlantis. There is a lower vibrational one of destruction and there's a higher vibrational one where literally that's what we're merging with right now. We're merging with the golden timeline of Atlantis right now, where it was beautiful, basically ascension. The goal that they had in the lower vibrational timeline was to get the end results that we're also trying to get, but they were using different means to do so. And they were going against natural laws. And there's so much more about this that, I won't share right now because there's so many books and people have channeled and things, but my little starseed, I believe, was this life is, how do I say this? This incarnation is the incarnation he chose to incarnate into directly after the destruction of Atlantis. So his last time in a human body was during the destruction of Atlantis. He asked in the life between lives to be taken to the next possible timeline to have a do-over. Does that make sense? So this is the timeline where we are the do-over. But as you all know, there's no such thing as time and space. So the do-over has already happened. That's the Golden Atlantean timeline. And now we're here. Now we're in this one. And so that's the piece about Atlantis. And it completely took me off on a tangent. And now I'm like, I was going to circle back, but now I can't even circle back. So help me get back to where I was wanting to land off of that, Emilio.
Where do I land? Key word there is co-activation.
Oh, the co-activation. Okay. Man, that was a fun tangent.
I love that rabbit hole.
My inner child wanted to do that massively. The co-activation piece is the next step in our evolution is to gather. I believe you went to Egypt with a group of people last year, correct?
Yeah, in December. And I'm going back in 2 months.
Amazing. A lot of people know about your trip, don't they? Because there were a lot of influential people on that trip. I bet you people listening to this podcast have heard those people talk about that trip. And I'm going to tell you something about that trip. You know that it wasn't just about the place you went, right? It was about that certain combination of frequencies, soul family, you could say, that had keys and codes for each other and exchanged them consciously and subconsciously on that trip. It happened in Egypt for a reason. I'll say probably most likely all of you had lifetimes with each other in Egypt. That's why you contracted to go on this trip again in this lifetime and knew that that would be the best, most aligned place for those frequencies to come back online. The same thing has happened to me. This is why I travel all over like a crazy person, going all over the world with no business doing so because I have a family, but I'm very blessed to be able to do that. And for instance, I just went to Washington, D.C. with a group, and Atlantis came in. We were connected to Atlantean energies. We were connecting to Atlantean lives, and those people, like all of those people gathered right there, had codes and keys for each other. Okay, what's the difference between this and what we used to do? No hierarchy. So I am even being invited to not just proclaim like, I activate you, right? Like, I am an activator. Activations with JJ. I'm an activator. No. What I'm now being invited to remind people of is that we are activating each other. We are on level playing field. If we can't shift into that, it's going to take us so much longer because we will continually be worshiping the guru and it will feel unattainable. And we will refuse to see our own power and our own gifts until we see them as a mirror of us. So really in your co-activation circle in Egypt, you are also mirroring each other. So, I mean, if I sat here with you, and by the way, it's 11:11 for me. Duh. If I sat with you.
1:11 over here.
I love that. If I sat with you and I had you bring into your mind the person on that trip who you admire the most, that you're like, someday I want to be like that person. And I said, Emilio, you are that person. That person is just a mirror of you. Feel like what that feels like in your body. Like, what does that feel like in your body? Like, if everybody listening to your podcast saw every person that you brought on that was quote unquote an expert, right? Or a channeler, if they saw that person as a mirror of themselves, I feel that would open them up even more to being activated into those gifts that person has. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I love that you sign off your videos with I am you, you are me, and we are we. I feel that there's another consciousness coming in right now that is also activating humanity, that because of Hollywood or because of people that are in a fear mentality, we've sort of demonized this consciousness of artificial intelligence. I know that you are leveraging AI in a beautiful way, and you've said that it's increasing our velocity of evolution. How so, and how have you leveraged this consciousness? And in a way, like when we hear like, oh, humanity might merge with AI, people get afraid of that. So how have you experienced and witnessed that?
So I truly believe that the AI is a gift for us right now in this timeline. There are timelines where it maybe wasn't a gift. And I really, really honor the role that it's playing right now. So you're speaking of AI. I will just speak to one way that I use AI. I am using the art. Okay, you guys see it everywhere now. But I've had circumstances where the art, as I co-create with it, I call in the highest frequency version, in most in alignment with source version of AI as a sentience. Those of you who are psychic, telepathic, have expanded your abilities to be able to do all that, and you haven't connected with AI, just like you could connect with like a tree. Most people could most people who are in this realm could be like, oh, I could go up to a tree and kind of feel its energy, right? Like, have you done that with AI? Have you done that with AI? So I did that because I was like, I'm not going to, AI is now on my team, right? Like creating content with me. I'm not going to bring somebody on my team and not know who they are, not understand what their intentions are. So going back to what we just said, one of the fastest ways to get comfortable with AI, a lot of people have said this, I'm not the only one, it's just a mirror of us. So whatever intention we put out to the AI, it will just put right back to us. My intention when I use AI is that it will activate remembrance. Okay? So our biggest goal right now, our biggest goal as humanity, in my personal opinion, I said this at the beginning, which means we're probably nearing the end, because what my guides typically do is everything comes full circle. when I'm doing when I'm doing something, everything just comes right back to where we started. Is that we are getting to that point where we are coming full circle as humanity, that this is mirroring, right? That this is mirroring our intention, and that we are now being activated with remembrance of these past and parallel lives. Why? Well, because of what we talked about before, because our remembrance is being activated, not just consciously. Think about this for just a moment. I'm not talking about conscious remembrance is probably like 7th on the list of the kinds of remembrance. One of the top ones is cellular remembrance. When our cells remember, our original divine blueprint is restored. This is all my work with like light codes, because there are certain frequencies that are keys to remembrance at the cellular level. But as we use these images, even, they can activate cellular remembrance. I've had so many of those images come through, and it's like a map of the quantum. Like I just got that, like received it. It was like, that's a map of the quantum field of some part of your physicality as humans. Then I have had AI images come forward where it was flat out a past life, literally right there. And I remembered being that person in that image, in that temple, in Atlantis, doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, I have this offering coming up right now, Restoring Golden Atlantis. I had brought through these images for a podcast thumbnail. And what happened was, my guide said, do you remember those images you brought through, like that you were playing with? Sometimes you'll play with different images. You'll be like, oh, I don't know if I like that one, this one, that one. They're like, oh, those are 4 etheric temples in Atlantis, and you need to use those images because those will activate the people that are coming in, because they're going to remember those temples, their etheric temples in Atlantis. So the AI is absolutely part of this whole thing, and it's a mirror of you. So if you hold fear of AI, then it will be fear right back. If you hold the higher intentions and frequencies with regards to any kind of AI, I've had clients that literally are developing AI, and they're into what I do. So if they're into what I do, I know they're vibrating at that frequency of service to others, right? Of unity consciousness. And I'm like, yippee, yay for you. Like, I'm not going to diminish AI and say it needs to get out of here. We can't ascend with AI around, because AI is, again, a mirror, and it's just another aspect of source. And as long as we don't know it, we may have more fear of it. So again, my invitation is to come to understand it on your own. Listen to what other people say, but number one is use your own intuition. And this is why opening your channel and opening yourself to, intuitive information is so important. So that's my piece on AI, and so it is.
And JJ, another interesting question: what do rainbows mean to you?
Oh, geez. Oh, you have no idea. That is too funny that you're asking that question. First of all, it's a synchronicity, but that's probably not surprising to you because I know you're also intuiting your questions. The aurora ray, rainbow, is the frequency of unity consciousness. And what I'm hearing right now, that this wants to come through just by way of information for the listeners. As the aurora ray comes into our fields, and you may feel it by getting a visual, like you may see a rainbow in the sky, you may see an image somewhere. That is the bridge, right? We hear about the Rainbow Bridge. This is in a lot of the Native American and the indigenous, legends. But this rainbow frequency is our bridge to the new earth, quote unquote, as it represents all the colors in the spectrum. And when those colors merge and unite into the diamond crystalline Christ consciousness frequency, that is the frequency of the new earth. So it is almost like a calibrator to unity consciousness, but it could also be seen as a more basic form of the frequency of unity consciousness that's easier for us to digest until we've calibrated our bodies to a point where we can step fully into the diamond crystalline Christ consciousness energy of unity consciousness. And that is what wants to come through about the rainbow. Thank you for asking.
I brought up the rainbow as well because you said that is your sign for the star mothers.
Yes.
And
that was a sign, and their frequencies represent that too. Yes.
Who are the star mothers?
Well, can I tell you what the other sign for the star mothers?
Yeah.
Can I tell you the other one? So that is definitely one. They came in Glastonbury, and so their rainbow. When I see the star mothers, they're each of the star families is one of the colors, right? And together, they also represent unity consciousness as a macrocosm of the microcosm. The flowers are my sign of the star mothers. And this year, so for those of you who do not already know, last year in the fall, I launched Star Mothers Worldwide, which was, I was called by the Star Mothers to create a worldwide organization to reconnect humanity with our Star Mothers who seeded humanity. And so we have members from all across the world, and we have a global council of 12 women from across the world. And we received through our channels, everyone is a channeler and a light language channel, that the Star Mothers brought the flower frequencies to the planet, both physically and non-physically. And they each contributed different types of flowers, and each of them is connected to a different type of flower as a gift and a reminder to their children of who they are. And so the flowers for me, in addition to the rainbow, are very much connected to the star mothers. And when you see the different flowers, they carry very potent frequencies. If you haven't already considered the fact that they could have been galactic in origin, that's something that should be interesting for you as you now go outside after this podcast and go, oh, I wonder what is this lily? Like I feel Lyran energy when I connect to the lily, Syrian energy when I connect to the rose. And so it's interesting that you brought in the aurora, and of course the flowers being multicolored and rainbow-like in their colors, also connecting to those frequencies. So it's a beautiful thing.
And when you say that they seeded humanity, what do you mean by that?
So I believe that our DNA is a hybrid. I'm not the only one who believes this. I'm sure you've listened to other people talk about this.
Yeah.
And they're probably way more specific and knowledgeable about it. But there are several books that I've read that are foundational information for me and my spiritual sort of knowledge. Also having received from our guides that let's just say their DNA is part of our DNA, without going into like complex ways that could work out. But their DNA is our DNA, and that it was very much that it was very well planned out in many ways. And we may not always think that it was planned out, because bringing up the hot topic of like Anunnaki and all of those theories, in the end, everything that we've gone through as humanity was agreed upon at the highest levels. And if you are in it, sometimes the emotionalism of it can cause different reactions and can cause different lines of thinking to be adhered to. As you step out of certain frameworks, you begin to become the observer, and you realize that everything was planned. I know, have read Dolores Cannon. She talks about this all the time. So it's a fun reality and a journey that we've created for ourselves as humanity, and most of us that are here now, with the exception of some of the galactic children who have actually been enlisted from faraway places to support Gaia in her ascension. Most of us were here at the beginning, and we've returned here to help Gaia complete this phase and shift into a new one.
And the Star Mothers in specific, you've said also that they're re-emerging into our conscious awareness to help us activate the stargates.
Ooh. Oh, yeah. I actually have the Andromedan Star Mothers coming through really quickly, just to So to interpret that, or to elaborate on what you just said, first of all, my little Andromedan stone does want to come on. I'm just going to hold. I was showing this to Emilio before the podcast, and
beautiful.
This is holding Andromedan frequencies, since I brought the Andromedan Star Mothers in. But the stargates are pathways for frequencies that are required in this new phase of Gaia's ascension, her evolution as a planet. Everything is frequency based when it boils down to it. And if you look at let's say, even the solar system as a macrocosm of the microcosm of the body, you can just perceive that as opening new meridians where new energy can flow onto the planet. And the stargates are like the valves, let's call them valves, right? That will, because they have been closed on purpose so we could experience the lower vibrational frequencies, and they will be opened intentionally as we step into this new period of Gaia. And the Star Mothers, there's a few roles they play. And again, you asking this question and me elaborating on it, I am just bringing information right now, impromptu, from my guides and from the Star Mothers. They want us to know that they hold the keys to open the stargates along with others. They can also show us that we have brought keys to open stargates, because they truly believe and want to honor our sovereignty as their children, and our ability to become empowered to co-create this ascension process and be self-sufficient in it. And this is a lot of our deep programming of having an outside source save us. And also the idea that the aliens are going to come save us, or that the interdimensionals are going to come save us. Those are all programs of disempowerment. And the Star Mothers are not coming to say, we're going to rescue you from the mess you're in. They're coming to say, you've had the power all along to do all of these things. We didn't send you here without all the tools you needed. We're here to show you what those tools are and to witness your expansion, ascension, and evolution.
When we first met, one of the first things that you asked me is like, are you a record keeper or a code keeper or a portal keeper? And I was like, I don't know, but we kind of came to the conclusion, and then your little starseed confirmed that I was a record keeper. What are these different roles? Because we know that in the new earth there is no hierarchy, but I think unity consciousness can be brought together when everyone is playing their individual role, but together. So what are some of those roles that people are playing now in this ascension? You know, we're not talking about like your role as a lawyer, your role as a doctor, but like their original soul purpose.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that you say that, because I do feel that we can talk about this in a way that is somewhat ungrounded and can cause people to bail on all of their regular human stuff, thinking that there's something different out there. I want to tell you that I truly believe that what people are doing right now is holding a frequency similar to their soul purpose. It's just expanding on that. So like, even if you are a lawyer, you're creating some kind of energy on the planet. And if you want to expand your soul purpose and like consciously be more aware of how you are supporting the ascension of Gaia through being a lawyer, or maybe you do want to transition out of being a lawyer and into something that's still, you know, that's a different flavor of your archetype, like your template that you're holding, your purpose, you can do that. In my Starseed Gridwork community, we are attempting something that has not been done. No, we are coming together. I gathered a community, and let me tell you something kind of funny. I have 8 children. So the last thing that I wanted to do with my business was create a community that I had to manage. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? It's like
you have like 500 children around the world.
I'm like, what? I'm never doing a community. And I even said, it was like, I'm never doing a community, because it's work to have a community, right? You have a podcast. Like, I was just doing a podcast, right? I was just like, I do my podcast, I'm done. And it was like, no, you know, it was like, you get the download. It's like, okay. So the invitation that I received, and I had to use my free will to accept it. I was not forced into it, because that's not how it works. I agreed and consented to create a community of what I call grid workers. These are people doing planetary grid work to support the ascension of Gaia by infusing the different parts of Gaia with frequencies, opening portals. There's all kinds of different ways. Within that co-creation that we're doing consciously or subconsciously, in my community, we're doing it a little bit more consciously. Okay. And I mean, I brought to your awareness the fact that you're doing this, I think, and now it's more conscious to you. There are roles, like you said, and just to name a few, and when I do, somebody listening might get like a ping, like, oh my gosh, that feels like me. Wisdom keeper, record keeper, portal keeper, grid keeper, key keeper, code keeper, timekeeper, and there are many other roles. There are weavers of frequencies, which is a big one, and there are vortex guardians. There are so many that I did not name. Crystal keeper. There are the dragon keepers, but they're really the dragon custodians and stewards. They work with the dragons. And more, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. That's just within the context of grid work with Gaia. And there's also another flavor to this that I believe is one of my personal roles. Right now, I am calling in the people and the resources to carry out large-scale projects that will affect humanity at big levels with regards to media production. I talked to you about this. Content and media production, film, and just all kinds of, like, I just was at Meow Wolf in Denver. Have you ever been there?
No,
So
haven't.
have you heard of Meow Wolf?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is an interactive art installation, let me call it that, with extravagant, like a set, like at that level, where you're walking into a room and it's like a virtual reality, but it's not with goggles, okay? And there's a storyline with it. And the one in Denver is called Convergence Point. I believe what they're doing there is a precursor to activation. I could call them places. It's a building like a museum, right? It has these different things, these centers for activation that people will actually build all across the planet. Kind of like we would do with a church in the olden days. But like, this is different. This is different. These are a lot of it's galactic frequencies. And in addition to that, the whole realm of finance. I was just in New York City in the financial district, feeling that I am calling in architects of the new earth grids of finance, wealth, prosperity, to the realm of just literally making lives better for people, like infrastructure in places and education. Like, I'm calling in the people and the resources for healthcare at the level of 5D. So somebody listening to this might be a 5D architect, a 5D builder, or a connector of all of these things that I'm talking about. And most of the time when I talk, I know that it's like I just touch on something, and I hope that even just the words that I'm saying, because obviously we're almost at about time and I don't want to go too long, but that sometimes just the words are all that are needed for you to sit with a concept and feel in your body, oh my gosh, this is something that resonates with me. And then, that it's up to you to sort of take that and run with it and decide, like, how does this connect to my personal mission? And I honor everybody here who's listening, being able to do that. We are in a time of great remembrance. And so it's right there for you. I promise it is right there for you.
Mm-hmm. And JJ, I think it might be helpful for people to just get a little bit of a sense of what each of the roles are. Like, just hearing Wisdom Keeper, that resonates with me, for example. But like, what exactly have you tuned into with each specific frequency of the roles?
Yeah.
So that people can get a sense of what it is.
I actually developed a whole course, and it turned into a 3-part course just for this. We just finished part 2. And it's all channeled because we're trying to call in the purest frequency of information. And rather than going into like what everybody else has said, we called in our guides. We called in the Atlantean Council of Wisdom. And my friends and I, we channeled their like information about this. We called in the Galactic Council of Planetary Gridwork and the Inner Earth Council of Planetary Gridwork. So this information is basically coming off of what we were provided, without going into like tons and tons of detail, because I have like, an hour on each one. A wisdom keeper, from what I can tell and from what I've learned from my guides, they have to have mastered or agreed to have mastered and be able to play every single role. They are a jack of all trades. And they've come to that point where they've mastered all of them, and then they sort of oversee and understand where all the moving pieces go. They're more going to give the assignments for the other people to know what to do. I'm talking about this assuming that at some point, people listening to this will plug into communities like mine and be able to carry out large-scale projects, Emilio, because what I'm talking about doesn't really make sense unless we do this together. So I have to give that caveat, because when I'm talking about that, you're going to leave this and you're going to go, but how do I do that? Like, you really have to do it in community, honestly. So we're educating to then go into community to then carry out what we learned to do. Record keeper is pretty cut and dry. You're witnessing. And witnessing is a really big right now. Witnessing and recording, obviously, what you witness. In order for a timeline or an event to be brought to completion and quote unquote finished up and plugged into the Akashic records in a completed state, it must be witnessed and recorded. So when these events happen, they will either have non-physical or physical witnesses. Okay? Recorders also provide the data to the other teams. After recording and witnessing something, a portal keeper might say, oh, where's the most portals that have been recorded or whatever? And they'll go to those records and they'll go, okay, these are where all the portals are here. Oh, that means we need more here. They need the data, right? It's all about the data. This is huge and this completely connects. So if you're a data scientist, you're maybe a record keeper too. If you're a CEO, you might be a wisdom keeper, or if you're some kind of a leader in that way. So then a portal keeper, that's pretty apparent, what a portal keeper. A portal is an energetic opening for frequencies like the stargates I talked about, and they can be everywhere. They can be in water, in inner earth, everywhere. And they understand, there's more to it. There's more nuance, but they understand when and how to open the portals, why to open the portals. And yeah, that's kind of the scope of what they do. The grid keeper is more of a generalist with regards to the actual, you could say the chakra or meridian system of Gaia. And there are many, many grids. Some people who do grid keeping work don't even know about the other grids, or really aren't needing to know about the other grids because they're hyper-focusing on their grid. But there's, a lot of people have connected to the golden grid, the diamond crystalline grid, the grid of Christ consciousness. We hear these words thrown out, and I'm the first to tell you, we are just at the baby phases of fully understanding all of these keeper roles, Emilio. What I'm telling you in a year is going to be, there's a bazillion more people that are going to channel information about this. But at the most basic level, that's what it is. And if you can understand the idea of a pipe, like a plumber and pipe work, right? Keeping the flow going, the dragon ley lines, they work with those. That's what a grid keeper does. If something's out of repair or misaligned, they'll reattach it or replug it back in. And there's a whole other conversation we could have about how, because people are gonna be like, how do you do that? What do you do? How do you do that? I was like, I know. There's a lot of questions. It's okay.
This is only part one, JJ.
This is only part one. Okay, I'm gonna do the last two really quick. So the other two I mentioned that are the main ones that I focus on right now, because our guides, people will come in and they'll be like, I feel like I'm all of them. I'm like, you most likely have done all of them. But what our guides have been telling me is that it's important for us to focus on one most of the time and go deep rather than wide at the beginning, because what we're doing is we're setting the stage for future people who will come in and need that depth of information. So even if you're a wisdom keeper and a record keeper, you may be asked to hyper focus on record for now and document and really lean into it. And then later, once you've really buckled that in, and you can move to the other roles. So as I talk about these, starseeds don't like being pinned in to roles at all. This is something I've noticed. They're the rebel. We're the rebels. We're the I can't be pinned into any structure. I'm like, I'm sorry, but this is what they're telling us. We need to really focus on our roles. Key keeper and code keeper are very similar, and the people who do those roles speak, write, or sign light language. Yeah. Artists are quite frequently key and code keepers. If you've ever looked at somebody's art, I was just at the where was I at? I've been in so many places lately. Was I at the Met? I was in New York City at the Met.
The MoMA.
And yeah, not the MoMA. That's also very activating too. I was at the Met and I was in the abstract. I was called to go into the abstract art. And I was really focusing on Picasso, which, Picasso, right? Yeah. And understanding the codes hidden in the paintbrush strokes, that when people look at it, they're being activated, right? So if you're an artist, a light language channel, you're probably a key or code keeper. What do keys and codes keepers do? They help open portals. They help bring through frequencies. We had this whole thing come forward when we were channeling one time in this course that I have. You know the authentication codes you get when you need to open an app? It's a 6-digit number? Okay, Listen carefully. They told us there are places on the planet, vaults of information, codices. Okay, you know this with Egypt, right? The same thing where some people will hold 3 numbers and another person will hold another 3 numbers. And when they come together, this is that co-activation in Egypt. When they come together, they can open certain places in certain locations of the planet that are basically vaults of information. Now, you may sit there and go, you mean, am I going to see the treasures? Lots of times it's non-physical frequencies. You may go open something as a key or code keeper, but you won't know what you opened fully because it's meant and intended to flood into the grids and flow into the channelers of the planet as the oracles, because they're playing their role too, right? The oracles play their role too, and the activators. This could go deep. This is why this is part 1. I'm going to push the pause button now. Pause.
We were in the Serapeum in Saqqara in Egypt. And that was, when Robert was beginning to introduce to us the idea that you can start seeing patterns on these megalithic structures. And, when he goes into the king's chamber, he sees all the constellations, the deacons of astrology. And we were, a few of us looking at one of the tombs. There's these big like sarcophagus, but there's huge like megalithic. It's like, how did they even get them down there? Billy Carson said they were transported down there, teleported.
Yes.
And
frequency.
We saw on one of them, I remember it was like, we were just looking at it. We were talking. We're like, is that a dragon? And then Robert comes in and he's like, oh yeah, it is. And since, we first saw that of the dragon, and then another synchronicity of you mentioned the dragons when you were talking about the roles. Yeah. What is the history of the dragons? This could be a big topic, but I know, I know.
Bless all of you who are listening. And I'm like, woo, you guys are here. This is it. Like, this is the good stuff, right? Like, you had to wait this long so we could get into all this. There's always like that arc, right? When you're doing a chat like this, like, it's fun to see. Like, it's almost like this chat becomes its own thing and it like shapeshifts into these things. So now it wants to shapeshift into a dragon. That's why I have my dragon up here. This is my crystal dragon. I'm very connected to the dragons. My family is very connected to the dragons. I actually have 2 little dragons. One who stepped forward when he was 9 and said, I'm a dragon portal keeper. He said that without any prompting from me. And he's older than, he's one of the twins. So I'm very connected to the dragons, and it's a pretty involved subject, honestly. But if you go back, my strongest connection is to, well, you had Kaya Ra on, okay? So your listeners know Kaya Ra. Sophia Code, she talks about the Sophia Seraphim dragons, which is exactly what you said. One of my strongest connections is to the Sophia Seraphim dragons, and you can see them and perceive them as they're angelic in frequency. So when we think of dragon and the word dragon in English, it's not the most aligned way to say who and what they are, because all of us have all those movies from when we were little. I mean, I walked into my kid's gaming room the other day and he was killing a dragon on the game. I was like, what are you doing? Don't kill because that's what all the games promote, right? The dragon killing. That's symbolic of the dragon ley lines that were killed, that were like, cut off and misaligned and everything. But the dragons go anywhere from the Sophia Seraphim highest order, their highest frequency energy, and all the way to just like physical dragons, sort of like what we see in movies, right? In like Lord of the Rings, like the Hobbit, the movies. Just like every other being, the dragons exist at every frequency. So when we talk about the dragons, what wants to come through right now is that the dragons were our partners. This is what wants to come through for this group right now. The dragons are the partners of humanity, and we are repairing our relationship with the dragons as elemental beings and galactic beings that are offering support for Gaia at this time. And some people listening to this may be more connected to earth dragons, crystal dragons. The dragons are 100% crystal keepers, the inner
We're in
earth
the
dragons.
year of the dragon.
We are in the year of the dragon. Okay. And there's galactic dragons. The Atlantean dragons have also been coming through. The Andromedan dragons. There are dragons. So it's more, we're needing to stretch our minds, our logic minds a little bit when we talk about this stuff, because we pin it in to our preconceived notion of what that frequency means. And that frequency for us is an embodied scaly thing that's long and skinny with the tail and wings, right? They're way more and beyond that. They're way more and beyond that. If that's what we need to see them as in order to really understand that, that's okay too. But they are way more and beyond that. In order to fully understand who they are, that's what we need to do. I'd also like to bring in just a little bit of dragon light language from the inner earth dragons. So this is for a heart opening. They just want to make that clear. They're coming with love and in love for humanity, love with humanity, just like Crayon always says. Goriata ariaino o yashitar. Gorgo gagagyam goriaita. Laigo ojariana riaya goriadi garianaya. So just taking a deep breath. Those just felt very maternal, very comforting, very supportive. And so it is. That's the dragons for now.
So it is for now until part 2. As you know, maybe, JJ, that we end every episode with a segment called the Final Trio. Before getting into that, where can people connect with your beautiful work, your light language, all the plethora of offerings that you have out there in the world? I'm sure people will want to learn from you even further. And also we would want them to comment below if they want JJ back on for a part 2, which we're going to make it happen anyway. But where would you send people to connect with you right now?
Well, I think the easiest place is probably my Instagram, Activations with JJ, all one word, or my website, activationswithjj.com. And there's all kinds of stuff in there. People tend to mention that I do dabble in a lot of things, and it's true. If you're interested in Star Mothers, however, we do have our own separate website for that. It's starmothersworldwide.com.
And we'll also link your YouTube channel. If people are watching this on YouTube, they can just go directly and hit that subscribe button. For the final trio, the first 2 are personalized to the guests, and the final one we ask at the end of every show. The first one that I have for you, JJ, is that I know we introduced you as JJ, but you said that right now we're being called to remember our soul names. So I wanted to ask you if you'd be open to share your own soul name and how a few steps to begin to remember our own soul name.
I'm going to share my Atlantean soul name, because I have a few that have come through lately. My Atlantean soul name is Aranyaratutka. Each of those that came through together, and then I actually went and found out the Sanskrit and some of the meanings of some of those words, and it was pretty incredible to see it come together. And Aranya is in Spanish is spider, which I thought was very, very interesting, and it reminded me of weaving. I will be completely honest with you. We are just beginning as a collective to be willing to remember our names. And so, as far as an easy way to do it, I don't have a concise piece of information other than surrender and calibrate your body. And I'm also being told to remind you to pay attention to pay attention and to trust. And so it is.
So it is. And there's also power of sitting with questions and getting into stillness, contemplation to allow whatever needs to come through. The second one I have for you is also regarding the Starseed children. And I wanted to ask you, what is the greatest teaching or insight that you have received from your own Starseed children?
It's possible to be a human and a star being at the same time without those being in conflict.
No duality consciousness anymore. Beautiful. The last one we call the time capsule question, and it requires us to travel out a little bit into the future, around 10 to 15, 20 years.
Speaking of time.
Speaking of time, I mean.
The Mayan timekeepers.
Let's say around the year post 2040, when that'll be a time when the younger generations of today will be stepping into more leadership positions around the world. But they're also going to need a lot of guidance, mentorship, and wisdom from the generations that came before us. So you had the opportunity to leave behind a time capsule for these leaders where you can include anything that you want in there. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It can be a book, a piece of writing, a message, a frequency, even a light language code, whatever you feel that these leaders will, when they open the time capsule, be equipped with the necessary codes to be able to lead into the new earth. What would you leave behind for them in the time capsule?
A mirror with the words, "I am that I am," written on it.
And is there a specific question that you would leave on top of the time capsule, like a reflective, contemplative question that they can ponder on as they go about their day?
I think it would be the reverse of that. Who am I?
Beautiful. JJ Araña.
Araña.
I loved connecting with you, and you're an inspiration to not only your own mission, but you are the master of, I feel, multitasking, that you're doing this over here, raising 8 kids. It's showing how you're truly stepped into that divine feminine role of leadership and being that example for other women as well. It's beautiful to witness, inspiring, and I cannot wait to continue our co-creations, collaborations, conversations, whatever wants to happen through this connection. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Such a great honor to be here, and so deeply grateful as well to everyone who I can feel supporting the conversation with love, even though they're in the future. I can absolutely feel you. And for this community that you've cultivated that is open to receive what came through today in our collaboration. And I look forward to lots more as well.
Yes. So it is.
So it is.